Hey, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
I think we're gonna get started here. We're gonna get situated here. My name is Dave Raney, and I am a retired newspaper reporter. And I was at the Wichita Eagle through the 1990s and the Morris Journal World from 99 to 2006. And from 2006 to 2016, I was with the news service that was part of the Kansas Health Institute. For the last, let's see, I won't do the math, but I was a once a week volunteer at the women's prison here in Topeka for 14 years. But we got wiped out by COVID. And since COVID, my schedule is readjusted to life without TCF. So I haven't been back since COVID is what I'm trying to say. And we're gonna be talking about Sarah Gonzalez McGlynn tonight. And I was thinking about it. I have email and telephone privileges with Sarah, but I haven't seen Sarah. I haven't been in the same room with her for probably 5 years.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Sharon Sullivan. I'm Executive Director of International Public Policy Institute, as well as Professor Emerita at Washburn University. I am a subject matter expert on human trafficking and violence against women and children. We're so grateful you're here today to have this conversation. And we're here today to share Sarah Gonzalez McGlynn's story with her consent. And our goal tonight is that after hearing Sarah's story, you will join us in encouraging Governor Laura Kelly to grant clemency for Sarah. We're also asking you to consider the big picture question. How do we define justice for abused women, an abused woman who kills her abuser? The content of this presentation may be activating for some people, so please take care of yourself. If you need to leave the room, feel free to come and go as needed. We have some advocates who will step out. Michelle here if you need. Otherwise, I tell my students, we don't know if you're going out for a tinkle or a cry. So just take care of yourselves, please.
Before we get started, I need to explain a couple things just to raise my comfort level. Because I'm a retired newspaper reporter, I have taken a journalistic approach to this, and I need you to know that everything we're going to be talking about tonight can be backed up with documentation. And there'll be some opinion tonight, but if we make a point, I'm not going to make a point that I can't back up with documentation, or it's in writing. That's what I'm trying to say. I also need you to know that most forensic evaluations involve 4 and 5 hours of pencil and paper testing and an in-person interview for 1.5 hours, something like that. Sarah has been psychologically evaluated twice. Well, the first time, her psychologist was Marilyn Hutchinson, and Marilyn Hutchinson didn't spend 1 hour with her. She spent 16.5 hours with her. She didn't have 1 visit with her, she had 8 visits with her, okay? So Marilyn Hutchinson, in her meetings with Sarah, she established trust, rapport, and truth. And so a lot of what you're gonna hear tonight comes from what Sarah shared with Marilyn Hutchinson. And and Marilyn is very experienced, and she's made it very clear to me that Sarah's telling the truth. You will be hearing from Sarah herself. We have some recorded interviews that we did with her because I have telephone privileges with her. And let's So you'll be hearing from her yet tonight. That's it. And finally, we are not here tonight to retry the case. Sarah's legal options have run their course. It's water under the bridge. We can talk about it, but there's really not much point in arguing and criticizing and second guessing, because it doesn't matter. That's all water under the bridge. We are here tonight to talk about clemency and to encourage you to write or email the governor with your sentiments and to express support for clemency. And I hope you each have a card that has the governor's email and mailing address. And on the back of that card are some websites you can look at that have stories about Sarah. Okay. Sarah and I first crossed paths at the Topeka Correctional Facility in 2015. I think she'd been there 6 or 7 months for killing Hal Sasko, the man that she was living with at the time, or, you know, and he was probably best known around here as having the Cece's Pizza franchises in Topeka and Lawrence. Sarah was in Reaching Out From Within, which was an inmate-run self-help group that I helped facilitate. And I remember when she came to the group, and I was like, man, what is she doing here? I mean, she was so young. And I mean, I know that at the time she was probably 19 or 20, but she looked like she was 15. And she's very quiet and very shy. I don't know if she was at home, but how she was at home and in prison, she was very shy and very quiet. And I tell people that she was a waif, and you can roll your eyes at that, but for most women at TCF, this is not their first rodeo. They're what I call hardened survivors, but this was Sarah's first rodeo. She doesn't have a criminal record. This was her first offense. So it is Sarah's first rodeo, and she is not hardened. And she's, I don't know how to say it, she's not a criminal. And again, you can roll your eyes at that if you want. Anyway, Sarah was born in Topeka to a working class family. They struggled like many of us. They had 5 children in the house, 2 biological, 3 were adopted. There were demands on Sarah's parents' time and resources and mental health. Sarah's childhood was complicated by her family living next door to an older, demented man. And that's how others in the neighborhood described him when they were interviewed by police and others. And this demented man had sexually molested Sarah several times as a toddler, and the molestation had escaped her parents' attention. And that kind of strikes home with me in a way, because I mean, I remember when I have 2 daughters, and I can remember when they would come in from playing in the sprinkler and they'd taken their clothes. So I understand it. Anyway, it escaped their parents' attention. Sarah's parents became estranged. It was a difficult time for the entire family. Sarah was devastated by the breakup of their family, and she felt isolated and angry and betrayed, and she became rebellious. And though Sarah and her mother were living in the same house, father was out of the house, but though they were living in the same house, they were barely and rarely speaking. And when she was 15, when she was 14, and just let me tell you, the first picture you saw of Sarah and the horse, that's Sarah at 14. So that's how young she was when she first came to the attention of Hal Sasko. She landed this job at Cece's Pizza. She was so excited, you know, that, like any teenager, she wanted to have some money, finally gonna have some money of her own, and she wanted to get out of the house. And so, shortly after, now she'd been at CC's for more than a year. And when she turned 16, after she turned 16, Sarah was raped by an older friend of a friend who intentionally burned her left arm with a cigarette. And I do not mean to reduce or diminish the demented man molestation, but the rape is a violent rape. It's violent. And this is when Sarah's trauma kicks in big time.
So we have to understand that trauma literally changes the structure of the brain. And as a result, changes the lived experience of the traumatized person. We cannot understand Sarah's story without understanding the impact of trauma on the brain. And we have to remember that the human brain is not even fully developed until the mid-20s, right? So teenagers by default have less access to the prefrontal cortex, or decision-making part of the brain. So the prefrontal cortex is the thinking center, the reason, the judgment, the part of the brain that helps us make good decisions. And this is the part that isn't fully developed until we're in our mid-20s. Oops, sorry. And then we have the amygdala back here, which I call the dinosaur part of the brain, or the lizard brain. Some people talk about it as the animal part of the brain. It's the survival part of the brain, the part that ensures our physical safety. And when we talk about this as the fight, flight, freeze, or appease part of the brain, right? This part of the brain takes over and is the fastest part of the brain, right? Are we safe? Are we not safe? So then we also have the emotional regulation part of the brain, anterior cingulate. Did I mention I'm not a neuroscientist? But I can read all this. And this is the part of the brain that helps us regulate our emotions. But because it's towards the front of the brain, it's the part that we, again, cannot access right away. The part of the brain that we can access, again, is the lizard brain, right? The fight, flight, freeze, or appease. The part that takes over so that we survive, right? I like to tell the story, even though it's a really dumb story. I'm terrified of snakes. Like, I was raised in Texas where there's more venomous snakes than not venomous. And so I was just taught to be afraid of them. And I ran across a snake on my property, literally jumped like 3 feet. Like, okay, y'all, people that know me will tell you I can barely walk across the street without falling on my face, right? So how did I jump away from that snake as it was striking? That's the lizard brain taking over, right? It's the fastest part of the brain. And then the regulatory part and the frontal cortex are the parts that are last, right? So we have this part of the brain that responds to trauma in order to keep us alive. This is mine.
Are you through?
Yeah.
Okay. Then go to, there you go. Bear with us. So who is Hal Sasko? Sasko grew up in Titusville, Florida. It's outside of Orlando. He's the third youngest of 12 children in a large Catholic family. He spent 10 years in Texas as a young adult, an adult, I guess, working for a large corporation that ran large bars and clubs and restaurants, kind of like what you find in Kansas City's Power and Light District, and what Topeka hopes you'll find in North Topeka someday. At some point, he let the corporate office know that he was ready to get out of the nightlife business. And it just so happened that about this time, the company was getting ready to launch a line of pizza restaurants. So one thing leads to another, and he landed the franchise in Topeka in 1999. 3 or 4 years later, he opened the one at 23rd in Iowa in Lawrence. And in 2009, he opened the second location in Lawrence. In Sasko, when his first wife, the mother of his only child, a daughter, they divorced about a year after they moved to Topeka. Family members told police, and still tell police, that Sasko was a workaholic. And I'm here to tell you that he may have been a workaholic, but he was a lousy businessman, and he tended to spend money that he didn't have, and he borrowed money that he couldn't pay back. And his accountant told police that he was a whisker away from bankruptcy. In fact, he was gonna close one of the locations in Topeka. And according to several employees, Sasko went out of his way to hire high school girls who most would say were attractive. And after he hired Sarah, he had very little to do with her, because she's 14. And she was working the food line and the cash register, okay? And that all changed when he noticed Sarah came in with the burn marks on her arm. And they were fresh, so they're like bright red, and there are 2 of them. And so Sasko soon learns, all you gotta do is ask, Sasko soon learned that she'd been raped and that her parents were going through a very ugly and destructive divorce that had left Sarah angry and abandoned and betrayed. And Sasko, who's like 49 years old, recognized that 16-year-old Sarah was very, very vulnerable. And he starts telling her that, look, you don't have to put up with your mother. You don't have to put up with your mother. You can come live with me. I've got a big house. He says I have a daughter who's not having much to do with him. He misses being a dad. He says he'd like to be your dad, to give her the home life that she longed for, and to make life worth living. He's gonna show her how to run a business, gonna help her with college. Sharon's gonna talk to you about grooming.
So obviously, these are textbook examples of grooming, and grooming is the predatory act of maneuvering another individual into a position that makes them more isolated, dependent, likely to trust, and more vulnerable to abusive behavior.
So Sarah, go ahead.
So there's 5 stages of grooming. I'm gonna talk about all 5 of them, and Dave's gonna give examples. So victim selection, abusers often choose vulnerable people, right? Because they're easier to groom because of their vulnerability or perceived vulnerability. They gain access to and isolate their victim, so they'll physically and emotionally separate the victim from people who might disagree or be telling them different information. And then they usually attempt to make their behavior, to normalize their behavior, to make it seem like it's not a big deal what they're doing, that everybody does this. And I think we have several examples of this from Sasko.
Oh, yeah. So Sasko starts telling Sarah that, she doesn't have to put up with her mother, that she can come live with him. He said, he talks about her daughter, his daughter, is gonna give her the whole, and he assures Sarah that he's a Christian. And Sarah says that 3 months after she was raped, her mother made her quit CC's because it was interfering with school. But Sasko continues to have contact with Sarah. Now this is keep in mind, this is a 51-year-old guy talking to a 16-year-old girl who no longer works for him. And he would contact Sarah, and they would go to school, he'd go to her house when her mom wasn't there, take them pizza, he'd go to school and take her lunch, take her to lunch. But let's be clear, Sasko is not doing all this to be nice, he's grooming her. Sarah graduated from Topeka High School a semester early. She moved in with Sasko at his apartment in Lawrence in the spring of 2012. She was 17. After a couple of months, they moved into a house. If you know Lawrence, it's West 26th Street. It's about a block west of Holcomb Park Rec Center there in Lawrence. Sarah will tell you that at first all went well. Sasko was nice. She didn't have a problem with him asking her to put him in her phone as dad, because he was kind of acting like a dad, and it kind of made sense. It didn't seem like a big deal. So we're going to try to get Sarah here. And we hope she's talking about moving in with Sasko.
I broke it.
I hate when this happens.
I'm not allowed to touch buttons at home, I'm just gonna share that.
You have to restart the whole program? Wait for the program to respond.
Okay. Well, Sarah talks about how at first everything was great moving in, that she was happy to be there, that everything seemed okay. And I just, again, want to remind you that Sarah's 17, moving in with a 50-year-old man who claims that he's gonna provide for her and care for her like a father figure. And she believes him. I'm on the emotional abuse side. Smoke them if you got them. Okay, that's for the old folks. Wrong button.